No one in that dojo will ever forget the moment laughter died and respect was born. Because what began as a harmless joke turned into a lesson so powerful that it reshaped every heart in the room. And before this story unfolds, if you believe that kindness, humility, and hidden strength still exist in this world, then take a second to subscribe to our channel Kindness True Stories. Because the stories we share aren't just stories. They are reminders of who we are meant to be. And now let me take you to a small martial arts dojo on a rainy Tuesday evening where Pride walked in wearing a black belt and Destiny stood, quietly holding a mop. The dojo smelled of sweat and disinfectant, the kind of place where discipline lived in every corner, where students bowed before stepping onto the mat, and where Master Ryan Cole, a respected black belt instructor with trophies lining the walls, was finishing up an advanced class, his voice sharp and confident as he corrected stances and strikes. "Again, tighter guard, faster reaction," he said, while a group of students watched him with admiration, and that's when they noticed him. The janitor, a quiet man in his late 30s named Daniel Reyes, pushing a mop slowly along the edge of the mat, head slightly down, wearing worn-out sneakers and a faded hoodie, his presence so ordinary that most people never really saw him, except tonight was different. Because one of the younger students whispered with a grin, "Hey, Sensei, looks like you've got an audience," and laughter rippled softly through the room as Ryan glanced over, smirked, and said jokingly, "Don't worry. He's probably seen plenty of kicks with that mop," and Daniel smiled politely, saying nothing, continuing his work, but Ryan, fueled by ego and applause, walked closer and said, "Hey man, ever tried sparring?" "Just for fun." The room chuckled louder, expecting embarrassment, expecting refusal, expecting the janitor to shrink, but Daniel paused, leaned the mop against the wall, and said calmly, "I don't think that's a good idea." And Ryan laughed, crossing his arms. "Come on, it's friendly, no pressure. Unless you're scared." And that word hung in the air, sharp and unnecessary, and Daniel's eyes flickered. Not with anger, but with something deeper, something older, and one student noticed and whispered, "Why does he look so calm?" Daniel sighed and replied softly, "I'm just here to clean." But Ryan pushed again. "One round, I'll go easy." And after a long silence, Daniel nodded. "All right, one round." The laughter returned. Mats cleared, students gathered, phones subtly raised, expecting entertainment, not transformation. And as Daniel stepped onto the mat, something changed in his posture. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing steady. And Ryan, still smiling, said, "Rules are simple. Tap if it hurts." And Daniel replied, "Of course." The bell rang. Ryan moved fast, confident, throwing a quick jab, then a spinning kick, and that's when everything stopped. Because Daniel didn't panic, didn't flinch. He stepped aside effortlessly, like he had done this 1,000 times before. Murmurs began. Ryan frowned. Attacked again, faster, stronger. But Daniel blocked, redirected, and countered with such precision that Ryan stumbled. The room fell silent. And a student gasped, "What the hell?" Ryan's smile faded, replaced by confusion. Then frustration. "Okay. Nice move," he said, charging again. But Daniel's movements were fluid. Controlled, almost gentle, yet unstoppable. Within seconds, Ryan found himself locked, unable to move. Daniel's voice calm near his ear. "Breathe. Don't fight it." And Ryan froze. The instructor, the champion, the black belt, frozen. The dojo so quiet you could hear rain hitting the windows. Daniel released him immediately and stepped back. Bowing slightly, "I'm sorry," he said. And Ryan stood there, chest heaving, eyes wide, ego shattered, finally asking, "Who are you?" And Daniel picked up his mop again and said words that would echo long after. "Just a single dad trying to make an honest living." And the students stared. Not at a janitor anymore, but at a man who carried discipline without display, strength without cruelty, and kindness without demand. And as Daniel walked back to cleaning, a young boy in a white belt whispered to his mother, "Mom, is he a hero?" And she replied softly, "Sometimes heroes don't wear belts." And Ryan stood there humbled, realizing that real mastery isn't about being seen. It's about knowing when not to strike. And that night, though no one knew it yet, was only the beginning of a story that would change that dojo forever. Because the past Daniel was running from was about to catch up, and the lesson Ryan needed had only just begun. The silence that followed Daniel's quiet bow was heavier than any punch ever thrown in that dojo, and Ryan Cole felt it pressing against his chest as students slowly lowered their phones, unsure whether they had just witnessed embarrassment or something sacred. And Ryan finally cleared his throat and said, "Class dismissed." But no one moved, because curiosity had replaced amusement, and a senior student stepped forward and asked carefully, "Sensei, who was that?" Ryan didn't answer immediately, his eyes following Daniel as he wiped the edge of the mat like nothing extraordinary had happened. And finally Ryan said in a low voice, "I don't know," and that admission alone shocked everyone more than the spar itself. As the room emptied out, one by one, students bowed to Daniel instead of Ryan. Not mockingly, but instinctively, as if something inside them recognized depth when it saw it, and Daniel looked uncomfortable, nodding politely, whispering, "Please, you don't have to." But respect had already taken root. Later that night, Ryan stayed behind, sitting on the mat long after everyone left, replaying every movement in his head, realizing that Daniel hadn't used brute force or flashy techniques, only timing, balance, and restraint, the kind that came from years of discipline. And when Daniel finished his shift and grabbed his jacket, Ryan stood up and said, "Wait," and Daniel stopped, turning slowly. "Yes?" Ryan hesitated, then spoke honestly. "You weren't trained casually, were you?" Daniel looked down, his jaw tightening. "That was a long time ago," Ryan pressed. "Where?" And Daniel sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that carried old memories. "I trained overseas, under someone who believed martial arts was about protecting others, not winning." Ryan swallowed his pride and said, "You embarrassed me tonight," then surprised even himself by adding, "And I think I needed it." And Daniel met his eyes for the first time, seeing not arrogance now, but vulnerability. "I never meant to disrespect you," Daniel said softly. "I only defended myself," Ryan nodded. "I know. And I'm sorry." And that apology, simple and sincere, was something Ryan had never said to anyone beneath him before. The next day, rumors spread fast. Students whispered. Parents asked questions, and some even waited to catch a glimpse of the janitor who humbled their sensei. And Daniel tried to stay invisible, but invisibility was no longer an option, especially when Ryan called him into the office and said, "I want you to teach." Daniel shook his head immediately. "I can't," Ryan insisted. "Why?" And Daniel's voice cracked just slightly. "Because the last time I taught, someone got hurt and I promised myself I'd never put myself in that position again." Ryan leaned back, understanding that this wasn't about skill but guilt. "Everyone carries something," he said, "but hiding doesn't heal it." Daniel looked away, thinking of his daughter Sophia, waiting at home every night, asking why he looked so tired, why his hands shook sometimes, and Ryan added, "You don't have to be a sensei, just help the beginners. Show them control." Daniel stayed silent, torn. And that evening when he tucked Sophia into bed, she asked innocently, "Papa, why don't you smile when people praise you?" And Daniel paused, brushing her hair. "Because praise reminds me of who I used to be," Sophia frowned. "But you're good," she said. "I see it." And those words hit harder than any strike ever could. The following week, Daniel agreed to help one class, just one, standing awkwardly beside Ryan as students watched eagerly. And when a nervous white belt struggled with balance, Daniel knelt down and said gently, "Feel the ground. It's your friend." And the student relaxed instantly, improving, smiling, and Ryan watched closely, realizing that Daniel didn't teach with authority. He taught with care, correcting without humiliating, guiding without ego. And parents noticed too, whispering, "He's different." And for the first time in years, Daniel felt something warm stir inside him, not pride, but purpose. After class, Ryan approached him and said, "You don't just know how to fight, you know how to heal." Daniel replied quietly, "Fighting took a lot from me," and Ryan answered, "Then maybe teaching is how you give it back." And as Daniel locked up the dojo that night, he realized that the mop in his hand no longer felt like a shield to hide behind, but a chapter that was slowly closing. Because sometimes life humbles us not to punish us, but to prepare us for the moment when our strength is finally needed again. And somewhere deep inside that dojo, between worn mats and silent walls, Redemption had begun to breathe. The change inside the dojo was subtle at first, almost invisible, like the way dawn slowly replaces night without anyone noticing the exact moment it happens. But those who trained there every day could feel it, because Daniel Reyes was no longer just the man who cleaned the floors. He had become the quiet presence students sought out after class, the one they asked questions they were too afraid to ask the sensei. And Ryan noticed it too, noticing how beginners improved faster, how even advanced students softened their movements, learning control instead of domination. And one evening Ryan finally said, "You've changed this place." And Daniel replied honestly, "I didn't mean to." And Ryan answered, "That's why you did." But not everyone was happy, because respect invites envy just as easily as admiration. And a visiting instructor named Mark Dalton, a former regional champion known for his aggressive style, arrived to host a weekend seminar, his black belt worn like a crown, his voice loud, his presence commanding, and within minutes he noticed the way students glanced toward Daniel instead of him. And that bruised something fragile inside Mark. And when he saw Daniel sweeping the corner, he smirked and asked loudly, "So you're the janitor who embarrassed Ryan?" The room tensed. Daniel paused, then said calmly, "I never embarrassed anyone." Mark laughed. "Funny, because that's not how the story goes." And Ryan stepped in firmly. "That's enough." But Mark waved him off. "Relax, I just want to see if the legend is real." And Daniel felt that old weight return, the memory of sirens, the sound of bones breaking, the promise he had made to never fight for ego again. And he said quietly, "I'm not interested." But Mark pushed. "Afraid you'll be exposed?" And before Ryan could stop it, Mark stepped onto the mat, clapping his hands. "Come on!" "One round," students whispered nervously, sensing danger. And Daniel's hands trembled just slightly, not from fear but from memory. And he closed his eyes for a brief moment, seeing Sophia's face, hearing her voice say, "You're good." And he stepped forward. "No crowd," he said. "No filming." Mark scoffed but agreed, and the spar began. This time it wasn't playful. It was sharp. Mark attacked hard, fast, trying to overwhelm, and Daniel absorbed, redirected, avoiding damage. But something inside him cracked when Mark growled, "You think you're better than everyone?" And Daniel responded, his voice steady but firm, "No, I think everyone deserves respect." And in a swift, controlled motion, Daniel disarmed Mark, pinned him, and held him there, not hurting him, just enough to stop him, and whispered, "This ends now." And Mark struggled, then stopped, breathing heavily. Realizing he wasn't being humiliated, he was being spared. The room was silent again. But this silence was different, heavier, more emotional. And Mark sat up slowly, rubbing his wrist, then looked at Daniel and said something unexpected. "Why didn't you finish it?" And Daniel replied, "Because winning isn't the point." And Mark laughed bitterly. "That's what my teacher used to say." And that laugh broke into something raw, something human. And Ryan realized that Daniel wasn't just changing students. He was confronting broken men with kindness, the most dangerous force of all. That night, Mark approached Daniel privately and said, "I forgot why I started." And Daniel answered, "Then remember." And Mark bowed deeply, sincerely, something he hadn't done in years. But the past doesn't let go easily, because later that week, Daniel received a letter, thick, official, stamped with a name he hadn't seen in over a decade, and his hands shook as he opened it. A legal notice tied to an underground tournament he had once fought in, a world he escaped after a match went wrong, a match that left a man permanently injured. And guilt had followed Daniel every day since, shaping his silence, his humility, his fear of recognition. And Ryan noticed the change in Daniel immediately, the way his smile faded, the way he avoided the mat. And when Ryan asked, "What's wrong?" Daniel finally said the truth. "I hurt someone once." And Ryan listened, not judging as Daniel confessed everything, the fight, the arrogance, the consequences. And Ryan said simply, "You are not that man anymore." But Daniel shook his head. The law might disagree, and fear crept back into his life, threatening to undo everything he had rebuilt. That evening, Sophia noticed it too, asking, "Papa, are you leaving?" And Daniel hugged her tightly. "No," he whispered, but inside he wasn't sure. Because redemption always asks for a price. and Daniel was about to find out if kindness could protect him from a past that finally demanded to be faced. And as rain once again tapped against the dojo windows, fate prepared its final test, not of strength, but of truth, courage, and forgiveness. The letter Daniel held felt heavier than any opponent he had ever faced, because this time there was no stance, no defense, no controlled movement that could soften its impact, only the truth demanding to be acknowledged. And as days passed, the dojo felt different again, quieter, tense, as if the walls themselves sensed the storm approaching. And Ryan watched Daniel closely, noticing how he arrived early but left fast, how he avoided teaching, how his eyes carried a distant fear. And finally Ryan confronted him, saying, "Running won't erase it." And Daniel replied with a tired smile, "I know, but staying might hurt everyone." And Ryan shook his head firmly. "You've already changed everyone here. Don't decide for us what we can handle." And those words stayed with Daniel as he walked home, holding Sophia's small hand, listening to her talk about school, about how she wanted to learn karate like the other kids, saying, "Papa, Sensei Ryan says you're very good." And Daniel stopped walking, kneeling in front of her, looking into her innocent eyes, and said softly, "If Papa made a big mistake before you were born, does that mean he can never do good again?" And Sophia frowned seriously and said, "No, it means he should do more good." And in that moment, Daniel realized the truth he had been avoiding. That redemption isn't about hiding from the past. It's about standing in front of it without becoming it again. The legal hearing came sooner than expected, and Ryan went with him, sitting beside Daniel as a sign of support. While Daniel told the full story, not just of the fight, but of the arrogance that led to it, the regret that followed, the years of choosing, humility over recognition, and when the injured man appeared on the screen via video call, the room fell silent, and Daniel bowed his head and said words he had rehearsed for years. "I am sorry not for losing control in a fight, but for forgetting that my strength came with responsibility." And there was a long pause before the man replied, his voice calm. "I carried anger for a long time, but seeing who you became took that away." And the decision that followed wasn't about punishment, it was about closure. And Daniel walked out free, not just legally but emotionally, breathing deeply for the first time in years. When he returned to the dojo, students were waiting, parents were waiting, and Ryan stepped forward and said loudly, "This is Daniel Reyes, not our janitor, not a legend, but a teacher who reminds us why we bow." And applause filled the room, not loud and wild, but respectful and heartfelt. And Daniel felt tears rise, but he didn't hide them, because strength no longer required silence. Months passed. Sophia joined the beginner class, holding Daniel's hand nervously, and when she bowed on the mat, Daniel realized that everything he had endured had led to this moment, a chance to guide without ego, to protect without violence, to teach kindness through discipline. And Ryan watched proudly as Daniel officially took the role of instructor, not replacing anyone, but standing beside them. And the dojo became known not for producing champions, but for producing better humans, students who helped each other, who bowed to the janitor, the receptionist, the shy kid in the corner, because they had learned that respect isn't earned through belts, but through behavior. And so the story that began with laughter ended with humility. The challenge that started as a joke became a lesson written into every heart present that night, reminding us that you never truly know who someone is by their uniform, their job, or their silence, because sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose kindness every single day. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to look twice at the quiet ones, to respect before judging, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel Kindness True Stories for more real, emotional, and life-changing stories like this. Your support helps us keep spreading messages of humility, compassion, and hidden strength. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, kindness is the truest form of power.